Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Intuition Activation Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Rachel, a spiritual medium and intuitive coach, and I'm so excited that you're here to join me for this intuitive development journey. And I want to start off this week by apologizing for the missing episode last week. For those of you who follow me every week and are expecting a podcast episode to come out every single week, I'm so sorry that that did not happen last week. But it seems to be that it's relating back really well to the July energy forecast because my reason for it not showing up was a lot of unexpected things sort of coming in my way and preventing me from recording this podcast. There were many failed attempts and many roadblocks that sort of got in my way. And then I sort of went back and listened to the July energy forecast. And a lot of the things that came through with that theme of firework is little fires everywhere. And to expect the unexpected, to have your plans kind of go awry and to be able to surrender to that. And that was really sort of the theme that I was experiencing very strongly last week. It felt like every plan I made went up in flames and I had to sort of pivot and move along with it. And there's something to be said about just sort of listening to your intuition and kind of going there, everything is getting in my way. Maybe there's a reason that I cannot have a podcast out this week. So I finally just surrendered and let it go for last week because so many things kept getting in my way, whether it was babysitter canceling or the guests that I was having, that I was going to have on, it not working out in our schedules, the kids constantly interrupting while I was trying to record on my own, just so many things, technical errors. Anytime I tried to record an episode last week, it just didn't happen. So here I am. Anyways, it's Monday morning. I'm sitting in my office, hopefully trying to record a couple of episodes so that I have a few more in the bank so that that doesn't happen again. If you were waiting for an episode last week and it didn't come, I sincerely apologize. I'm going to do my best to make sure that doesn't happen again. But again, it is sort of just proving that the energy forecast really is ringing true. And something else that really struck me in the July energy forecast, which, by the way, if you haven't listened to it, go back. It came out on July 1st, channeled from some beautiful angels who offered sort of the energy to expect in the month of July. There's still a week left of July. Could be helpful to listen to it and reflect back on the month and see if it was ringing true for you. So I highly recommend going to have a listen to that. I find myself relying on these energy forecasts a lot to kind of offer myself some grace when things, especially in a month like this where things aren't going my way, that was sort of to be expected, and to know that this is sort of the energy that the collective is experiencing. And in talking to a bunch of friends and other business owners, a lot of people were kind of experiencing this feeling of putting out little fires everywhere this month, and lots of things coming to the surface and feeling like productivity was just at an all-time low this month. And heck, guys, it is summer. And, there's something to be said about just enjoying the summer months, at least for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, it's summer. And, there's something to be said about just taking that time with your family to enjoy it without trying to push the gas pedal so strongly. And so I sort of leaned into that this week instead. When all of my efforts to get any work done were just epically failing, I finally threw my hands up and said, you know what, gonna spend the time I do have with my kids. And my husband and I went on we took the kids and went on a last minute little weekend staycation, little getaway up in Muskoka, which is this beautiful lake region about an hour away from where we live. And just had a wonderful weekend and kind of just let it go, and coming back new and refreshed for this week, ready to give you some new content. So I hope you guys if you are feeling the energy of July very strongly, especially that it was a full moon, I think last night, if not tonight, I can't remember when it's coming. There's definitely a full moon. So you might be feeling some energy of that and maybe some energy of solar flares. So lots of emotions coming to the surface. And if that is you, then I empathize with you. I feel you. I am with you. And just know that we are all experiencing this collectively. It is not just you. So maybe allow yourself to just surrender if things aren't going the way you planned it, to just let it go and pivot and allow yourself to just enjoy some quality time with the people you love, and try again when the energy's kind of simmered down a little bit. that's my suggestion to you. I definitely could have used that advice a few days ago. That being said, today's episode is actually inspired by a session that I had with a private coaching client. So, for those of you that don't know, I do run a 12-week program. And thank you to those of you who have been putting in or filling out the forms showing me interest in participating in that program when I hopefully launch it this fall. So, if you're curious about my 12-week program, definitely head over to my website and check out the name is going to be changing, but right now it's called the Intuitive Power Masterclass, my 12-week program. But for some people who don't want to wait to do the group program or just really want that one-on-one attention, I do work with private clients to help you develop your intuitive abilities, and either in a 8 or 12-week program as well. And this is sort of where I really work with you one-on-one to really fine tune what your intuitive abilities are, how you channel best, what your clair is, and what is your purpose for using your gifts. Because once you access your intuition, there's so many things that you can do with your intuitive abilities, right? You could be an animal medium, you could channel spirit guides like I do, you can channel loved ones, you can be an energy healer, right? There's so many avenues that you can sort of access. And so that's why it can be really helpful to kind of work together one-on-one, where we can really fine tune your gifts and the reason you want to use them to help other people. And so that being said, I was working very closely with one of my private coaching clients last week, and we discovered she had quite a knack for channeling loved ones, for mediumship, for connecting with people from the other side. And it was such a beautiful experience because we went to our session with her hoping to attempt to connect with her own grandparents. And in the end, she ended up channeling my past grandfather, who only passed about a year and a bit ago, maybe almost 2 years now. And I hadn't really had many chances or taken many chances to try and connect with him myself. So it was so beautiful to have her connect with him and receive all of these messages for me from my own grandfather. And so it was just so beautiful. And then, of course, we channeled her grandparents as well. And I really realized that this can be so beautiful, and that channeling or doing mediumship, connecting with people who have passed away, is actually a really good stepping stone for connecting to your intuition or developing your intuition and building your confidence in your abilities. So that's what we're going to talk about today. How do you go about connecting with your loved ones from the other side? What does that look like? What are some things you can expect? What are some of the things that you might not have expected to be part of the experience, and sort of what you can do to use this as a means of developing your intuitive abilities. So we're going to dive into all of those things today. So let's dive in. Let's talk about how it is that you can channel your loved ones from the other side. Now, I do want to start by saying that, and I tell this to my clients all of the time, mediumship or connecting with loved ones is not my strongest ability. It's not my strong suit. It's not something I say I don't enjoy it, but it's definitely not my favorite version of channeling. And so I'm not as practiced in it because I don't offer this as a service usually to my clients. I always tell them I will try, but I don't know what's going to come through. And I don't claim to be that kind of a medium or that kind of a psychic medium. And there are a few reasons for me why I kind of made that decision. Part of it was that I really felt that my mission and my journey in life was to connect with spirit guides, because I feel that your spirit guides are so pertinent and so specifically there to help you find your true path and purpose. Whereas connecting with your loved ones, while it's really beautiful, they tend to it's more about just sort of reflecting on memories. And I don't find it to be as helpful to somebody's life, possibly helpful to the healing journey and the grief journey for sure, but not necessarily helpful to helping you align with your true path and purpose. And that's really, what gets me, to wake up in the morning. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning, is helping people find their path and purpose and their mission in life. And so I find, and when we talk to loved ones, it's more about replaying the past or talking about things that have already happened. And so I don't spend a lot of time with clients working on or connecting with their loved ones. However, that being said, connecting with loved ones is the first thing that I ever did when starting to connect to my intuition. It was the first experience I had where I kind of went, oh my God, I can do this. And I do want to say that the reason being that it actually is easier to connect with your loved ones who have passed away, who are on the other side, than it can be to connect with your spirit guides. And that is because when we think about where our loved ones sit, they're actually much closer to the earth plane than our spirit guides. So I want you to picture sort of the earth as a circle. And if you think about sort of rings around that circle, right? So there's sort of like a circle inside a circle inside a circle. And so that first circle, the innermost circle being the earth plane. Then if you go one layer outside of that, one circle outside of that, that's what we would call the astral plane. And that is where our loved ones sit, the plane that's kind of just directly above the earth plane. And so they're a little bit closer because then the next layer outside of that, the next ring, as you would call it, would be the causal plane. And that's sort of where our spirit guides live. There's a beautiful medium, a very talented medium named Ainsley MacLeod. He's written a book called The Instruction. I highly recommend going and reading it. It is so fascinating. And he talks about in a lot more detail what it means to be on the astral plane versus the causal plane and all of the other planes that kind of exist out there. He also is a really talented medium who can connect to loved ones quite well and talks a lot about soul lives or soul numbers. And so I highly recommend giving that book a read, especially if you're curious about past lives as well. He's really, really talented in channeling those and connecting with those for you. So highly recommend, or helping you kind of figure that out for yourself as well. So I really recommend The Instruction by Ainsley MacLeod. And I'll link that in the show notes for you. But this is sort of where I first heard about the different planes. And sort of experiencing it myself, especially when I was starting to connect with my intuition and learning how to channel. It was interesting to discover that that was the truth for me as well, that it is actually easier in some ways to connect with your loved ones on the other side than it can be to connect with your spirit guides because they're a little bit further up or a little bit farther out. However, in some senses, it can also be a little bit trickier to connect with your loved ones, and I'm going to tell you why. In a moment, but there are some things that are really easy, which is connecting to them initially. And then there are other things that maybe get a little bit trickier as we're trying to get specific messages from our loved ones. And I'll explain why in a little bit. But the first thing I do want to say when we're trying to connect to our loved ones is I want to talk a little bit about the process, because it is very similar to the process you would have to take to connect to your spirit guides. And this is that you have to do whatever you have to do to get out of your head and into your body. Do something to get you away from your chattering thoughts and into a place of calm and quiet so that you can actually hear and connect to your loved ones from the other side. So if that for you looks like a few deep breaths, maybe a meditation, maybe a walk in nature, maybe a journal session, whatever it is to sort of filter out the chattery thoughts that live in your mind all day long. For me, this often looks like taking a few deep breaths, usually 5 breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. And then I'll do some sort of visualization meditation, right? I visualize myself in nature somewhere. I'll visualize myself placing my bare feet flat on the ground, doing a little bit of a grounding. And I recommend doing this, especially when connecting with loved ones, doing some sort of grounding visualization. And so the visualization I like to use is placing my feet flat against the earth, or imagining that I am, and imagining tree roots or cords coming out from the bottoms of my feet and going all the way down to the center of the earth and wrapping around something sturdy at the center of the earth. So a tree trunk or a crystal or a rock or a stone of some kind, really connecting me and anchoring me to the earth. I usually like to envision, some sort of beautiful healing energy coming up from the center of the earth and coming back into my body. So knowing that I am sending roots down and bringing energy up towards me. And usually that's enough to sort of get me relaxed enough to then call in the guides. And so at that moment, I will just out loud, you can do this in a short, quick, easy way. Spirits of the light, are you here with me? Or you can say, I would say, I'll take this moment to call upon either my spirit guides or my loved ones. When you're calling in a loved one, it's helpful to call them in by their name. So you would say, I'd like to take this moment to call upon my grandma Joe, right? Or my grandpa Steve, or whatever it is. Do you have to use their full name? No. Can you? Absolutely. It definitely makes things more specific. They know who they are. They know who their relation is to you. I know that with my grandfather, the first experience I had, I actually didn't call him in. I was just trying to connect, and he showed up. Um, but when I have tried to call or connect with him, um, post that first experience, I just called him Zadie because that's what I called him when he was here, that being sort of the Jewish or Yiddish way of calling someone grandfather. So it can really be whatever their relation to you is if you're going to call them by name. But again, the more specific you are, the better. So if you want to call them by their full name, that helps too. And then you call them in, ask them to join you. Don't forget to call in for protection. So you'll take a moment to call upon Archangel Michael to send a circle of protection around you, and making sure that you only connect to those of love and of light. So that's what I'll say. I call upon Archangel Michael to send a circle of protection around me, and to please ensure that I only connect to those of the highest vibration, of the highest good, of love and of light. And just by saying that, it is so. He has done what you have asked, and you are protected in that moment. And I will say that it is important. That step is quite important when we're connecting with loved ones. And it is important to be certain of who you're wanting to call in. And this advice is not to scare you, but just to, I guess, provide a forewarning that loved ones can sometimes be very excited to connect with you. And usually the individuals who are in your family, or that you know who have passed away, who have had more vibrant personalities, who maybe spoke a lot, who are very extroverted, who were very big talkers, they're going to tend to be the ones that are going to show up first if you don't call in guides by name. If you just call in my loved ones and see who comes through, which you can do, right? Just calling upon my loved ones and see who shows up. Usually the one who is kind of a little bit more outgoing and more expressive is going to be the person who comes through first, and maybe not who you were expecting. And so often I'll find this with clients, if they do ask me, can you just see who wants to come through? Usually the loudest family member is the one who will come through first. And sometimes it's like someone's crazy aunt, or, something like that, or, a brother who was really a jokester or something like that, someone who was a little bit more extroverted. If they were the kind of person who did a lot of speaking and who was a little more extroverted in their human body as a live person, that's the same personality that's going to show up in sort of spirit form. And this is good to know, because then the same is true for the opposite. If the loved one you are calling in is somebody who, was maybe a man of very few words, or a woman of few words, who you really had to sort of draw them out or ask a lot of questions, and maybe having a conversation sometimes felt like pulling teeth, right? You really had to ask for a lot of details. That's going to be very much the same experience you're going to have with them when connecting to them from the other side. So I have two grandfathers who have passed, and the one who came through to me so clearly without me even asking for his name, just asking for loved ones, and he came through, was definitely a much more social butterfly, social being. And so he came through very easily. He had lots to say. I didn't even have to ask questions. He just started talking. Versus my grandfather, who passed away only a couple of years ago, he was not a big talker. He was very introverted, very quiet. And so I found myself having to ask him a lot of questions in order to draw him out. And he wasn't forefront. He didn't seek me out. I had to go and seek him out. And so that could be the case that, it can also be helpful to try and connect with a loved one who, maybe is a little bit more expressive at first. And the other thing I will say is, when you call in your loved ones, I can only offer you the experience that it is for me, which is that I am clairvoyant, and I tend to find it to be a much more visual experience than it is necessarily connecting with spirit guides. When we talk about spirit guides, I find that all of the senses are at play. We can hear them, we can feel them, we can see them. Claircognizance is at play. There's a knowing. There's a lot of them doing whatever they can do to sort of send messages across to you. In my experience with channeling loved ones, I find it to be a very visual experience. I find them to want to share a lot of memories in visual form, and memories often kind of look like movies flashing across my mind, and them showing me sort of images or memories in that way, sort of the same way you would experience your own memories in your own mind. You sort of see them in your mind more than you hear them in your mind. And because they're sharing memories, that's sort of the way that they're communicating with you. So if visualization or clairvoyance is not your strong suit, this is probably one that you might have to work to develop a little bit to connect with your loved ones. Although I would like to say on the flip side, trying to connect with your loved ones could be the thing that develops your clairvoyance and helps you develop it much faster because this is the way they tend to communicate with you. And so the first thing I will say when you call in your loved ones is that you're going to most likely get a vision or a picture of them, of the body that they held when they were here, what they looked like. And now this is where things can get a little bit tricky because sometimes, most times they'll show up in the way you remember them, sort of the body they embodied before they passed away, or, maybe a little bit healthier if they were very ill before they passed away. But sometimes your loved ones will choose to embody a younger version of themselves, the version of themselves that they feel they were at their best, the body that they enjoyed the most. And so I know that my grandfather, the one who had passed away only a couple of years ago, he was bald for as long as I knew him. He had no hair, but when he was a younger man, he had a beautiful full head of hair. And he lost it, I think, somewhere in his 30s or his 40s. And so when he shows up, and my student channeled him, she said he had this beautiful hair and it was perfectly combed over. And I seen pictures of him like that, and he always used to boast about that version of him. He loved his hair. He was known for having beautiful hair. My grandmother always bragged about his gorgeous hair that he had and how it was such a shame that it all fell out. And so when he showed up as a spirit, he did show up with the full head of hair. And so at first I wasn't sure that it was him because I only ever knew him as bald, until, more information came through. And so just to be aware that they could show up as a younger version of themselves or a version of themselves that they enjoy more or enjoyed the most. And they really have that choice because when they're in spirit form, they're not in a physical body. They can show whatever image they want. They can show the version of themselves that they feel the best. So just take note of that. And sometimes I find that they'll tend to, if there is sort of a signature style that they had, a signature outfit that they wore, they will tend to show that to help you identify them as who they were. And so, I know one of my great grandmothers showed up in a way that for me, like I'd never met my great grandmother. She passed way before I was born. But I saw her sort of in this, she used to wear apparently like this kind of moo type of a dress and these pearls around her neck. And that was sort of how she often dressed. And so, when I then described her to my grandmother and asked her, is this my great grandmother? Did she wear this? She would say, oh yeah, that's what she always wore. So you would see that my grandfather, always wearing, sort of known to wear a plaid shirt, and some jeans. And so, he showed up like that, so that you could recognize him. And my other grandfather, always known to be really well dressed, always wearing a really nice tailored suit in a crazy color. And so he would show up like that every time I channel him, like this purple suit, right? Or like this bright pink tie or something, because he was always known for dressing very colorfully, and really, really dressed up. And so, they're going to come through sort of in a way that would help you identify them as them if they had a signature style or a signature sort of clothing item or a piece of jewelry that they often wore. They'll do that to help you identify them. So that's always good to know and something to maybe look for, or especially to help you if you're channeling a loved one for somebody else. You can start to describe that individual and make sure that you have the right person. Sometimes their hair, if there's very significant hair features, you'll be able to see that. Right? If someone had really curly, frizzy hair, you would be able to see that. So it's really helpful. And again, it is a bit, as I said, a bit more of a visual experience. And so now once your loved one kind of comes through, maybe you're able to see them. This is where I find that sometimes things can get a little bit tricky, because I sometimes find that you have to do a little bit of teaching to your loved one. Now, the loved ones who are really out there and outgoing and expressive, they tend to be the talkers. They tend to be the ones who will answer your questions, who will have lots to say, who will share lots of memories. But sometimes I find there are others who they just kind of wait there and wait for you to ask them questions. And again, sometimes this really has to do with the personality that they embodied when they were here on the planet. Maybe they weren't the first person to initiate a conversation. Maybe they were a little bit more shy or introverted. If this is the way that person was, then it's going to be the same case when you're connecting with them in spirit form. You're going to have to be the one to sort of prompt them or coax them to do the speaking. If you just kind of like wait for them to speak, you may just only see them and they won't talk. So you have to start asking them questions. The other thing I will say is that sometimes, and I'm not sure how true this is, but this is just sort of in my experience, depending on how long it's been since they've passed away, I find that sometimes they might find it a little bit more challenging to figure out how to send a message to you or how to speak to you. They almost can show up visually, they can show you that they're there. But then when you go and ask a question, it's like crickets. It feels like there's nothing coming through, or you're waiting for them to speak and they're not speaking. It's almost as if they haven't quite figured out how to send a message across. And by asking them questions is going to be the way to sort of help teach them to communicate with you. And so you want to start by asking them questions that you know they for sure know the answer to. So things that are maybe trivial about their own life, memories that they may have had. So things that you know that for sure they know the answer to, and for sure you know the answer to. So they can start to create, you can start to build that relationship and conversation with them. So maybe there's a favorite travel spot, right? What was your favorite travel spot? Or, what was your favorite birthday cake flavor or favorite meal? Or, favorite, I don't know, things that you for sure would know, their favorite color maybe, right? Things that you could ask that you know the answer to that they could for sure share. How many children did you have, right? Who are they? What are their names, right? Those types of things that you know for sure they would answer. Because and I have to give an example of why I say this specifically is if you ask a question of like, what did you always give me on my birthday? If you were asking the grandfather, but really it was the grandma who was buying the gift and granddad was just signing the presents, just signing the card. He doesn't know what he got you for your 16th birthday because grandma was the one who bought it and signed his name on the card, right? So ask something that he really would know the answer to. Right? How many grandchildren do you have? Right? Hopefully they know that answer and they can start to share. And by asking simple questions that you know for sure they would know the answer to, it gets them speaking. And then you can start to ask more complex questions. Maybe, I'm going to give some examples of questions that you might want to ask that they seem to be more open to sharing. And definitely, if you have any questions around their passing, how they felt, or anything like that, they're more than eager to share that with you. Often they'll share that without prompting. They always want to let you know that they're okay, that they're not in pain, that maybe their passing wasn't painful, or if it was, that they don't feel any pain anymore. They always want to reassure you of that they're not in pain. If you are sort of feeling any guilt for any reason around their death, they're usually quite good at trying to mitigate that for you, soften that blow and take any blame off of you. And so, it's a good time to sort of explore those feelings with them. If there's something you want to say about that in your grief and in your healing process, they're very good at reassuring you that all was in correct timing and there was nothing more you could have done to prevent their death, whether it was untimely or not. Everything sort of happens for a reason, and usually it's timely. It happened as it should have, unfortunately, as regardless of maybe how tragic the circumstances may have been. And so once you sort of have identified who they are and asked a few questions about, trivia things about their life, you can start to get into some of the maybe reflection pieces on their life. But the thing I always like to say is, and what from my experience that loved ones really love to do when you're connecting with them, is to ask them or reflect upon their favorite memories that they have with you and in their lifetime. They tend to, that's when sort of the images and the messages tend to come flooding in very quickly and very easily, is when you ask about sort of the highlight reel, the favorite things of their life. And they're so eager to share that with you. And so if they had hobbies that they were obsessed with, or again, a vacation spot that they absolutely loved, or a certain memory or tradition that you did together, they're always going to sort of show images of those memories and reflect on them with you. And remind you that they cherish those memories with you and that they're there. And so really kind of allowing them to reflect on those things. They'll, if you just let them speak and you just kind of say, what do you want to share with me? That's usually the first thing your loved ones will share with you is their favorite memories with you and just their favorite memories in general of their lifetime. Because remember that in the astral plane, a lot of the times, a lot of the process of being in the astral plane, so that space post death, is to sort of reflect on the lifetime they just had. And so you connecting with them helps them do that. And you get to do it together. You get to reflect on that life and kind of have all of those good memories together. So it can be really, really beautiful. And as beautiful as it can be for you, it's actually really helpful to them because it sort of propels that experience forward for them, gives them the ability to do that reflection piece together with you. And so that can be really beautiful. But know that also in some cases, as they're doing that reflection piece, sometimes feelings of guilt or grief can come up on their end and maybe even regret. And sometimes spirit will relay that to you if there's anything they regret about their lifetime with you, any experience that they had, something they wish they'd done or wish they hadn't done. They will often express that as well to you. I know I had a client a very long time ago who the client had come to me specifically to just connect with his late father, and his late father turned out to actually be quite abusive, physically abusive to him in his childhood. And when I channeled him, the father came through, but he came through crying. Like I'm like, he's in tears. And all he was expressing was regret for the way that he had parented his son. And just and how much he had really, severed their relationship, and which made his passing very, very complicated for the son who is still alive, because there was very much sort of this love-hate relationship where he loved him and respected him so deeply, but also feared him. And so, when a loved one passes away, they can often, they do have a little bit more of a zoomed out experience, right? They're seeing their life as a whole. And they tend to sit in a place that's a little bit more loving and a little bit more of a realization. Remember, they're reflecting on their life to sort of kind of to pick up on what is it that they did that they feel was helpful in their growth, their spiritual journey. What are the things, maybe the lessons that maybe still need to be learned? What are the things that are going to take into their next life as unfinished business or to heal in the next life? And so they do, it's really about reflection for them. And so if there's any regrets that they have, they may express that to you and then maybe want to, do better in their next life. And maybe if you are with them in the next life, they'll, you'll have an experience or opportunities for that to heal together, or to heal that together. So that really can come through when you're connecting with a loved one. Now, I do want to be clear here. As I said, it does tend to be a very visual experience, at least for me. So you'll see sort of emotions on their face. That's the way I experience it, is if I see that they're feeling grief or sadness, it's as if I see their face with tears running down, and I can pick up on that feeling. And sometimes I will get that actual sensation, like I'll feel the need to cry. So a little bit of clair empathy going on, where I can start to feel the emotions of the individual. And I'd like to say that I do hear them as well, but to be honest, I don't hear very much when I'm working with loved ones. And maybe if I work with them a little bit more often, that skill would develop. I would argue that that's probably the case, is that the more I channeled loved ones, the more developed it would be, because this was the case for me with spirit guides, that at first it was only very visual until I worked to strengthen and develop my hearing abilities with them. And so perhaps maybe that's just my own experience, but I do want to say that they do tend to show images, right? A lot of images that will flash across your mind, similar to a memory. And that's sort of their way of reflecting and sharing with you their favorite memories or their emotions. And they can show that their emotions to you, how they're feeling about something, by showing their face within a certain emotion or expression on their face. And then you can sort of put the pieces together of how they're feeling about that. And again, you'll feel it in your body as well. You'll feel those emotions as well. And then this is also where claircognizance comes to play. Sometimes there's just sort of an inner knowing of what the message is that they're trying to get across. And so that does come through. And maybe sometimes there are a few words here and there as well. The one thing I do want to say is that timing for them is very different. Timing for spirit guides timing for loved ones, it's not the same. And so if they tell you that something is going to happen soon, if they're trying to offer a future prediction, which I would argue they don't do very often, but I have experienced that a little bit. They'll say something is happening soon. Maybe they're coming back soon, or they're going to reincarnate. They say soon. What soon means for us is very different than what it means for them. For us, soon could be tomorrow, soon could be in a month. For them, 100 years can feel like a blink of an eye. And so when they say something's happening soon, don't trust it as soon for us. It could be something very different. And that being said, I do want to also argue here. I used to believe that you can only connect with your loved one for as long as they're sitting in the astral plane. And once they reincarnate, you can't connect to them anymore. I've recently, not too recently, but since learned that that is not the case at all. That your loved one, even if they've already reincarnated and they are living another lifetime, they're already a baby or a child, on some other part of the planet, you can still connect to them as they are, because your soul is infinite. Your soul is just energy. And so you can connect to all parts of it. And so the same way that you can connect to a previous life of yours and a different version of yourself. And we can argue that all of our past lives are happening at the same time as this life, right? If we sort of think of the quantum planes, right? That you're experiencing all of your lives all at once. Well, that's exactly the case. You can connect to any version of yourself or any version that your soul has experienced. And so even if in our timeline, that soul has reincarnated, they're experiencing already a new life, you can still connect to the version of them that you remember, that you knew as your relation. And this is really cool because this has happened to me where I've connected with I believe it was somebody's grandfather who told them that they had already reincarnated, and that they were actually their own great grandson, which was really, really cool and so beautiful for the late wife to know that their grandchild or the great grandchild was kind of reincarnated on the planet with them present. Even though I was still able to connect to their late loved one. And so this can happen. You can reincarnate and come back to the same family. I don't know how often that happens, but I've seen it before. And so, it's really cool. And then you can still connect to the version of them that isn't alive, that had passed away, because again, our souls are infinite. And Ainsley MacLeod in his book, The Instruction, does talk about this a lot, sort of about children who will come back sometimes to the same families or the same city and remember every single member of the family and know all of these details about those individuals and things that have happened well before they were born, because they were the late uncle or the late grandfather who has come back into the family. And so that can happen. And so a lot of times people will tell me that they experience this in their grandchildren, that they seem to be like, it looks like the grandfather exactly came through again. And this very much can happen. And so you can connect to them from the version they were, the version that you knew, and then also find out that they're back, that they're alive, and that you can connect to them in this new body that they've come through. And maybe they're a little bit lighter, a little brighter, a little bit wiser than the way they were, before they passed away. So that can be really, really special to find out when you connect with your loved ones, and they'll tell you if they've come back. So that's really, really beautiful. One thing I do want to sort of offer as a piece of advice when you're connecting with your loved ones is make sure that you are aware of their capacity to offer advice to you. And so what I mean by this is that they are still going to have the same biases that they had when they were alive and embodied here on the planet. So if you're going to be asking them a question about your life, maybe about a business that you're launching or what to do, maybe you're feeling a quandary, there's a big decision you have to make. When you're asking them for advice, know that they're going to give you advice based on sort of their own hangups that they would have given you when they're alive. Now, know that, of course, once they passed on, they're a little bit more zoomed out. They're living in a place of a little bit more loving energy. So maybe it'll be a little bit softer and gentler than maybe when they were actually alive. But there are still going to be biases and hangups. So if you're going to be asking a question about your life, what's best for your path and purpose, I really want to strongly recommend here that you save those types of questions for your spirit guides, whose sole purpose is to help you along your true path and purpose. And I'm going to give an example of this. I had a client who was asking me to ask their late father, their late mother, what to do about an argument that she was having with her brother. Now, this brother was relying on her quite a bit financially and possibly manipulating her out of a lot of money and not kind of using her, but without integrity, so to speak. And this client of mine was very much wanting to create some very strong boundaries with her brother and sort of feeling like it wasn't helpful to him for her to keep supporting him financially. It was straining their relationship and not helping him move forward in life because she felt like she was enabling him. Now, when we connected to this person's mother, late mother, the late mother said, no, 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 continue to support my son. He needs your help. I'm not there to help him. I need you to continue to help him. And but then when we connected to her spirit guides said, no, no, no. And his spirit guides, even the brother's spirit guides, they said, no, he actually needs to hit a rock bottom to realize he can pull himself out of the dark and that he can support himself. And by enabling him, he's never going to get the chance to learn the lesson and figure this out for himself. And so you can see how these are two very opposing messages, right? The late mother telling this daughter to continue to support her brother, to support this woman's brother, to support her son. And that's what she would have done had she been alive. But what's actually best for this woman, my client, and what's best for her brother is for her to stop supporting him and to create some boundaries around that so that he can experience personal growth and she can experience a better relationship with him. And so that's two very opposing answers. And so again, be very careful about the types of questions that you ask. Know that they are going to give you the advice that they would have given you when they were alive, most likely. And so, if it's about your life, if it's about what's best for you, save those questions for your spirit guides. If it is about sort of just their opinion because you're curious about what they would say, go ahead, ask them. But again, better when we're connecting with loved ones to reflect on lifetimes, to share on good memories. And, you can ask for their help. If you're going on a future endeavor, I've had some clients with loved ones who will kind of offer them some help, some advice, maybe in a future business endeavor, try to kind of help them. I do want to say that loved ones don't really have as much manipulation power as our spirit guides do. As I've said before, in my own journey, even spirit guides, if you're not listening to them, if you're really off your path and purpose, your spirit guides can kind of create situations that will force you to wake up. For me, that looked like a car accident and a ski accident all in 2 weeks. I very much like to argue that my spirit guides were the ones who put that into place to show me that it was time to wake up, to put me back on the path of alignment. I don't believe that a loved one has that power for you. I don't think that they can create those situations to get you back on their path. Do I feel that they have a little bit of magic fairy dust and that they can help you a little bit in some things to help you with your successes in life? Absolutely. I've had clients where their late parents have kind of helped move business deals along, and you kind of will see little images or symbols that they would show as a wink or a nod that they maybe helped along a little bit. But again, I don't know how much manipulation power they really have. It seems to be quite a lot less than your spirit guides do. However, it doesn't mean they're not looking out for you. It doesn't mean that they're not watching over you. They're definitely watching. The question is, how much manipulation power do they have? And I would say very little, if any. And so to be aware of that as well. If you're looking for, big help with things, getting, the universe to kind of work in your favor, that's more of a question for your spirit guides as well. So yeah, just something to consider. And yeah, the one thing I do want to say finally is that when you're done connecting with your loved ones, so you maybe asked them all the questions you wanted to ask, you've shared the memories, and you're ready to sort of thank them and sign off. This is where you have to be really, really just be really adamant about clearing the energy or clearing the space afterwards. So be sure that you thank them, first of all, for coming through and for offering you the messages that they wanted to share. But then you really want to cleanse your energy. So this is when I will actually use sage. So for those of you watching on YouTube, I'm holding up kind of sage. I have a really pretty one here that has some flowers, but sage, right? These beautiful kind of this herb that you can burn. It has a really strong smell, but it's known to completely clear the energy. You would do that kind of in the room, and maybe even around yourself to release you of any energy. And the reason I underline this so strongly in cleansing yourself after connecting with a loved one is because remember that they're in a space where they're reflecting on their life. They're in a space where maybe they're feeling a whole bunch of different emotions, right? There's maybe a lot of grief and regret and, and sadness and also joy, but, lots and lots of emotions that they're experiencing, which now they've kind of impressed on you that they've let you experience so that you could see and connect with them. Well, you don't want to hold on to any of that once you're done connecting with them. You want to go through the rest of your day feeling lighter and brighter, not heavy or weighed down after connecting to them. So you really want to have a really good grounding practice afterwards. So I will always thank the guides. I will take a few deep breaths. I will light the sage and kind of sage the room and sage myself. I will also do some sort of grounding meditation. So, similar to the one I did before, maybe I'll see my feet go into the earth. Oftentimes I may even visualize sort of a cleansing meditation as if there's like a rain cloud that went over my head or a waterfall pouring over me and washing off any extra energy that I may have picked up in that channeling session. Then I will actually go and wash my hands with the intention that it is washing off any energy that I may have picked up. So definitely make sure to do that. And then even more so, doubly so, I underline this, if you were channeling a loved one for somebody else, it wasn't your own loved one. Again, because you don't know what sort of emotions you may have picked up and you don't want that energy weighing you down as you go through the rest of your day. So really make sure that you sign off well, that you thank them and you sage the room or sage yourself. If you don't have sage available and you only have Palo Santos, that's fine. And if you don't have either of those, at the very least, go and wash your hands. Even like with just some warm water and soap, that's fine. If you want to add a little bit more of a grounding essence, you can even pour some sea salt into your hands or just regular salt and scrub that between your hands, with the intention that it's washing off the energy, right? Think of salt of the earth, right? A very grounding force, and releasing that energy. So definitely make sure that you do that. Now, the last thing I do want to share with you is that you can also connect with your loved ones even without channeling them. Now, a lot of people always ask their loved ones, what are the signs and symbols that you're sending me? And you can ask them when you're channeling them, what are the signs? And they'll tell you what signs they are that are letting you know they're there with you or watching over you in that moment. And from my experience, they often tend to be signs that come from nature. So some of the big ones I see are red cardinals. Red cardinals tend to be a really good sign that your loved one is there with you. Sometimes doves, sometimes butterflies. A lot of loved ones will also tell me sort of the sunlight shining through the window, sort of that image of, when the sun goes behind the clouds and then suddenly it comes out behind the clouds and it's just shining really bright all of a sudden through your window as if you can see it streaming through. Often that's sometimes a loved one giving you a little shout out and saying hello and giving you a visit. I know with my grandfather, my Zadie, when he passed away, and we had his funeral, we were going to the burial site and just two double rainbows right across the sky. And I knew that was him because he was such a colorful person, so, like in his personality, but even more so in his wardrobe. And so I knew for sure that that rainbow was him kind of giving us a wink and a nod that he was there with us at his funeral, at his burial. And so that can come through as well. So definitely be sure to ask them what are the signs and see if you can see that image in your mind's eye. Trust the first one that comes to mind when you ask them, and trust that if you sense or if you feel in your claircognizance, in your inner knowing that that sign coming through is from your loved one, that it probably is. And even if you didn't have an actual channeling session, a lot of the times our loved ones will give us these little winks or nods to kind of let you know, hey, I'm with you, I'm visiting, I'm always with you. And they really are. They are always with us. They're always connecting with us. And sometimes they like to offer that little wink or nod from nature to share with you that, hey, I'm here with you. I haven't forgotten about you. I'm enjoying watching you and your children and your family, and we're together. So I do want to say, just to wrap all of this up, that channeling your loved ones can really be a great first step for building your confidence in your channeling ability. So if you've been trying and trying to connect with your spirit guides and maybe not having as much luck, I want to encourage you to maybe give connecting with your loved ones who have passed away a try. This might be the breakthrough that you need to connect with spirit or your intuition altogether, because in some cases it can be a little bit easier because they sit so close to you and they're always watching out for you. So, and the other thing is that you can actually do like a fact check to build your confidence and receive confirmation that the messages you received are true. So, if the loved one shares with you a memory that maybe you weren't physically present for, but another family member was, you can go ahead and ask that family member, hey, did this memory happen? Right? Or did my loved one wear this particular type of outfit? Does that sound like them? And they can confirm with you instantly, like, yes, that happened. How did you know that? Right. And then you'll really know that you did channel. And I know this was very much the case for me when I first channeled my grandfather. He started to tell me some of these memories that had happened in my parents' childhood. So when he was raising his kids, my father, and I then went and called my father and asked him, "Do you remember this memory?" And he said, "Yes, absolutely, I remember that." And this was not something that either of them had told me before. So then I received confirmation that that was something I channeled, that it very much was from my grandfather coming through. And when I did channel a great grandparent who I had never met before, I was able to sort of describe them and sort of their personality and their favorite memories to my grandmother. And she was able to confirm for me, like, yes, that does sound exactly like my mother. Like, how did you know that? There's no way you could have known. And again, that really acts as like a really good confidence booster that, oh my goodness, I did channel these messages. So it can be really good at building your confidence in your channeling abilities because you can receive such clear confirmation from people who actually knew them when they were alive. So I highly recommend doing that. And, another way that you could do this is if you're not comfortable with asking your family members about this and you do have a friend who's happy for you to channel a loved one for them, then they can offer you that confirmation right on the spot, right? You can start to describe the individual you're seeing, and they can confirm for you that, in fact, this is what their loved one looked like, or this is what their personality felt like. So this is really a great, great confidence booster. And it can, and then you're not going off your own memories because it's maybe someone that you didn't know at all when you're channeling for somebody else. So I really, really encourage you to give this a try. It can be such a healing and loving and beautiful experience to connect with your loved ones as they passed. Remember to protect yourself both at the beginning and at the end, to ground yourself at the end, call in your guides, do a little meditation, and ask them to come through. Ask your loved ones to come through and just see who shows up. And I wish you such a beautiful channeling session and connection to your loved ones. Don't forget to reach out to me on Instagram if you do get a chance to give this a try. Tell me what the experience was. I love hearing these stories and would love to share them on the podcast if you did get to have an experience like this. So definitely reach out to me at I am Jessica Rachel. I'm so happy to share those stories with you. And that's all I have to share with you guys about channeling your loved ones and mediumship and connecting with our loved ones on the other side. So I hope this was helpful for you. And I will catch you guys in the next episode. Have a beautiful rest of the week. Bye, guys.